You know, I've been talking about earned media value for quite some time on this podcast. My friends at Eisenberg have just raised the bar on earned media benchmarks with their social index. Social Index now gives you globally earned media values across a growing list of 6 geographies for all your KPIs across the top 7 social platforms: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. You can now visualize these values for deeper analysis, and they have a look-back window over 2 years of historical comparisons. Social Index is updated daily. Don't get stuck with old data. Over 1,000 companies have used the Social Index to understand the ROI of their social campaigns. And if you work with a social agency, you should demand they incorporate earned media values into your reports. Get your earned media value for social content. Visit earnedmediavalues.com/Alan. Again, that's earnedmediavalues.com/ALAN.
For all of us, it's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today. Today on the show, I've got Catherine Connelly. She's the co-founder and senior vice president of marketing for the Meet Group. Catherine's focused on growing apps like Meet Me and Tagged into 2 of the top 10 dating apps in the US. Her 16 years of experience includes co-founding My Yearbook at age 15, creating what would eventually become the Meet Group, and leading brand strategy and performance marketing for the Meet Group through a series of mergers and acquisitions and rebrands. The Meet Group most recently sold for $500 million in September of 2020 and is now part of Parship Meet. On the show today, we talk about the journey that she's been on since 15 and the twists and turns, as well as how she focuses on marketing today, what her tips are as it relates to performance marketing, and much more. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Catherine Connelly. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited about this conversation. It's not every day I get to talk to somebody that started their company at age 15. So, one, is that right? Is that really true?
Yes. And the older I get, the more insane it seems that my mom let me do that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How did it come about? Tell us the founding story, if you will.
Yeah. So it all started, my brother and I were relatively new in our high school. We went to high school in Montgomery High School in Skillman, New Jersey. It's one of those schools where, a lot of people have been there since kindergarten. And so we were coming from a super small school, new area, and just we're looking to meet new people. And we started, thinking, I wish there was a better way to do that. And being, I guess, clearly nerdy, we're like, well, why don't we build a website for that? So that's how, so that's how we got started. My brother, so I was 15, my brother Dave was 16, and our oldest brother, Jeff, had recently just moved back in the area. He would have been, I guess, 26, 27. And he had started his own company when he was when he was undergrad at Harvard. And so Dave and I growing up, because there was this fairly large age difference, had been introduced to entrepreneurship, and we're like, oh, that's, a valid thing you can do. So I think that Dave and I were kind of always just looking for an idea. And so when we had one, we were like, let's build it. And so, yeah, that's how we got started. Jeff joined as well. And when we started, we hired a team of developers and got to it, which at 15, there isn't a lot of risk to starting a company. So really it almost is that simple. It was like, oh, let's do this. And then you go for it. Because honestly, at the time it's like, okay, well, I could get a job bagging groceries at ShopRite, or I could do this. So the idea was, okay, well, let's create something and see where it goes.
Yeah. Get this straight. You and your 16-year-old brother come up with the idea. Your 26, 27-year-old brother, Jeff, is coming back from school, who he had already started another company, it sounded like.
Yeah, he had already he had recently exited that company. He was looking for his next thing as well. And he, was also able to, initial funding.
Yeah. Well, so are your parents entrepreneurial? Like you're all entrepreneurs at this point.
So both my parents are engineers. And so my mom actually growing up, she's an electrical engineer. Well, she's retired now, but she used to just say, oh, don't do what I do. Do your own thing, And so I think, but, obviously she was always very involved in the sciences and always, pushed us to basically follow what we wanted to do. But I think, certainly Jeff had been, very successful from a young age and, starting his own business. So I think, just the whole family was like, oh, that's the way to go.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, yeah, for all of you to catch that entrepreneurial bug relatively near the same time, that's kind of amazing. Must have been a lot of encouragement to pursue your passions at home. Well, so from age 15, you've got this idea, you're in school, you just want to meet people and you're starting to build a website and a platform to help make that happen. Tell me how you got from there to where you are now, which is the Senior Vice President of Marketing at the Meet Group.
Yeah, so it's kind of a bit of a winding story, but we've always been about meeting new people. So I guess kind of walking through the initial timeline. So, 2005, we got started. We had our first 1 million members about within 9 months of launching, everywhere. And that's when we opened our first office, New Hope, which is in New Hope, Pennsylvania, which is, not a tech capital at all, but a wonderful place to work. And that's where, we've been headquartered ever since. But we started as my yearbook and we operated as my yearbook as a website from 2005 to 2011 was the first major change. And in that change, we actually merged with a public company called Kpasa. And that's kind of brought us, that made us a public company. And so that was, at the time we had maybe about 30 million in revenue. And so that was for a public company, we're relatively small, but that gave us, great access to capital markets and, it was great for our growth. And around that time, we had launched our first apps in 2010. We had launched the My Yearbook app on Android and iPhone in about 2010. And at that point, we were noticing, that this is the future of the company. And so we basically put everything into mobile. And of course, an app that wants you to meet new people, it's very useful to have location services and to have, be able to see if you have a message just by a simple notification versus logging onto a website, which obviously you're going to check significantly less. So it was very clear that was the platform for us. And then in 2012, we rebranded the company as Meet Me. And so that was a big step because so my yearbook started because, we were in high school when it started. That's part of where the name came from. But the company actually was always about meeting new people from like the very, very early days. And so the name didn't really fit what our users did. So that's why we changed the name to Meet Me. At the time, I remember we did some surveys and I think it was like 20% of members or so said they would stop logging in if we changed the name from my yearbook to Meet Me. And we obviously did a lot of research there. But we thought, for potential members, it was just significantly more important that we do the change for our growth. And as we saw, basically all metrics were level or up from doing the change. It turns out a lot of people don't actually stop logging in, which, we were thankful for, but it was something that, that we wanted to track and do very thoughtfully. But yes, that's how we became Meet Me in 2012. And then we had a new shift in the company as we became, more mobile apps. And then in 2016, we were introduced to the idea of live streaming. And so live streaming had, been very big in a lot of Asian markets at the time, and still is. But it certainly, those markets were certainly much more into live streaming than the West for a number of years. But we had seen it in an app called Momo, and we're like, oh, this is actually similar to Meet Me in the sense that it's okay. You're kind of mixing social dating with live streaming. And the magic of that was, okay, so someone on a social dating app, they're going to be logging in very, very frequently to send messages, look at profiles. But, each individual session is relatively short. Whereas pure play live streaming apps, you have kind of the opposite. You have, relatively long sessions, but much fewer of them. So what we wanted to, and so we saw the magic there was, kind of pairing those two things so you can, lengthen your time with each individual member by having, even if they join, to check out a few live streams, once in a while, you can greatly increase your engagement with the member. And it solves some core issues of dating too. Because when you're on a dating app and you're not getting messages, you're having a bad experience. And so this gives you a good way to connect with you right away. And so we kind of saw that promise and bet the company on it. And so we didn't just say, okay, well, let's add live streaming to Meet Me. We were like, no, let's also acquire a bunch of apps following this live streaming strategy and put it in those apps too. And so that's what we did. We acquired Scout in late 2016, Tagged and Lavu in early 2017, and then later Growler in 2019. And when we did that, when we acquired the Tagged and Lavu, we ended up also changing our name to the Meet Group because now it was, confusing being Meet Me when that was just one of our brands. And now we had a number of them. But then, because we built the live streaming feature like that, such that we knew we wanted to put in multiple apps, we realized, why stop at our own apps? And so now we also have a video platform as a service business where we provide live streaming creator economy solutions to a number of the largest dating and social applications. So we're in about a dozen apps right now and running that service, for different brands as well, because of how we built it, we were able to do that. And so that's really, where we are now. So now, we have the, B2C side where we're, focusing on our members, but we also have the B2B side where we have partners. And then we were also acquired. So we're no longer public, but we were acquired in September 2020 by what is now Parship Meet Group in a $500 million deal. So now kind of that's where the Meet Group is now. And I head marketing, which is just, the Meet Me, Scout, Tagged, and Growlers, our owned and operated brands, as well as obviously working on the VPass platform.
Oh, well, you've been busy.
Yeah. It's been like 17 years. So
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty apparent. I mean, the number of, I don't know if you thought about it when you were going through it, but there's like little pivots here or there. And then you got the like aggregation of buying other apps and fine tuning, I guess, the markets that you're serving based on the needs that you have. But now you've got this portfolio of assets, apps in the B2C world that kind of span dating and just casual meeting up with folks, to the B2B side, which sounds complex, but I guess most of it is around the similar functions and features. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, right now for sure. Most of our partners, are very much in the social space, so it's very similar use cases. So I would say, other verticals are also interesting and can still benefit. Basically anything with an existing community of people can benefit through live streaming. I think that there was a real shift with the pandemic of people kind of on realizing kind of that power of connection and how important it is to have that place to connect with others in real time, no matter what you're doing, especially after we've had so much isolation.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, and I was gonna ask you. I mean, you kind of took us through the evolution of the company and kind of what it has today in its portfolio. But a lot's changed, from those early days. I mean, in the world and how we interact. And obviously the pandemic was a great accelerator of virtual meeting technology in general, whether it's one-on-one or in groups. How are you guys thinking about like where we are today and where you sit and how you see the world kind of going from that point forward, if you will?
So I think that, the world is going to be just even more focused on, we see people are obviously living their lives, digitally in different ways. Now, a lot of people are working from home and that's kind of become the norm. So you might be on Zoom for most of the day whereas before, maybe Zoom meetings or Slack were more of complements to your in-person interactions. You're kind of seeing the reverse. And so I think that, right now where, you get a lot of work done, where your focus now is on where the in-person is almost complementary. And, obviously dating, there's always going to be the aspect of being in person. That's a very important side of obviously having successful relationships. But when it comes down to it, a lot of interactions have gotten so used to being digital that just makes sense of that interaction is as well. And it becomes kind of where you're hanging out. But in terms of how the industry has changed, is there's been a huge shift, but there's also been a lot that stayed the same. So basically, you see live streaming video stuff has been a thing for many, many years, but now it's become, mainstream, especially when you look at one-to-many. But even when you look at so how we grew at the time when we first launched back in 2005, MySpace was basically where we engineered reality to get new members. We had user-generated quizzes. We took advantage of that and kind of built a nice flywheel from that. And now, there are still important viral channels. They're just different ones. It's not MySpace anymore, obviously, but it's TikTok. You have back in about 2010, we had a top 10 Facebook app, and that was important for getting new members too. And so knowing having to know where your users are really hasn't changed. Just what those platforms are and how to reach them has. And so I think the way that we think about it is like, the world is very, very different than it was, but it's also the same in a lot of ways. Like our members have always been interested in meeting new people. So we're always looking for the way to help them do that and looking for those pockets of members to find and connect them to. So I think that, the core user journey is actually still very, very similar. It's just kind of the tactics you use that has changed the most.
Well, and that acquisition, where to find them and how to reach them and how to loop them into your flywheel, so to speak, that makes a lot of sense. And with iOS, 14 and the changes as it relates to like Facebook and things like that, how has that shifted your ability to acquire or think about like how do we do digital marketing and acquisition efforts to try to get people on our platforms?
Right. So we did a lot of preparation, obviously, as did everyone else before the major privacy changes took hold. And, I think that we handled that well. But I will say, it definitely benefited Apple in the way that, Apple Search Ads has always been an important partner for us. But now it's probably even more important, especially on iOS. I will say that I did see rates increase on our Android campaigns as well, just because more money went into different campaigns. But I think there's a lot of trial and error in how you do things. And so right now, we've always been very experiment based. And so we'll have an experiment where we say, okay, well, let's see what happens if we turn off this platform. Let's see what happens if we increase this one. And when we just look to see what happens. And so, even though the scan tracking isn't what we were used to, there are still wonderful ways of measuring ROI and looking to still see results from it. I think it just kind of challenges marketers to be, that much more creative and that much more willing to experiment and test and see how they can measure. Because even if you don't see the initial change, you should see it just with your general numbers. So sometimes you might do a campaign and it's like, okay, well, I don't have as much visibility here, but if your organic numbers are increasing for no apparent reason, it might at the same exact time you started that other campaign, then that you can start making connections. But obviously it becomes very, very important to, and it always really has been, to really be measuring results and finding the KPIs that you need to be paying attention to.
That's interesting. And many different apps monetize the relationship in many different ways. Like Facebook is almost entirely an ad-based platform, right? Because it's free to users. But I think you guys have an interesting mix of different ways in which you're monetizing. It sounds like you have some advertising, but you're doing other things as well. Tell me about how you're monetizing this opportunity.
Yeah. So yes, the majority of our revenue now comes from user pay, which is through us. That's actually mostly kind of a tip jar model. And so members will make in-app purchases so that they can send streamers gifts, basically. And so the gifts might be a dragon animation that comes on the thing, or it could be something small like a gold star. But basically, they send the gifts to the creators and allows the creators to monetize as well. And so the creators, monetize based on the number of gifts they receive and the size of those gifts, and that helps them create better content because they know what's working. And so it's kind of self-reinforcing because usually say for instance that you only have a subscription model. And we do have subscriptions as well. And we have advertising, like you mentioned. But say you were only limiting yourself to subscription, which is a lot of dating apps do, then you're only going to get whatever the cost of the subscription is per month, whether that's $10, $15, whatever it is. But with this model, we monetize each user up to their willingness to pay. And so, that big dragon gift, that's going to cost $400. And members can send, multiple ones of those a day or a month. And, so it's going to be, a smaller percentage. So it kind of introduces kind of and you see this in gaming a lot where you have members that you call whales because they monetize at a very, very high rate, but you don't expect your average member to monetize to be spending, $400 in in a month. But you certainly see that as you certainly start to see that dynamic when you have a model that's, based on the in-app purchases that really allow them to, like I said, go up to their full willingness to pay. And so and for some members too, they might not have the disposable income to do that. We also have some rewarded videos so they can earn credits such that they can send gifts without paying money as well. And so it's important to find that kind of balance to engage, because a lot of features if you just think about adding a paywall, you're going to hurt engagement. But with this model, we found that engagement actually and quality actually improves, because you see that you give your creators a reason to create good content. And so you empower your creators.
Right. Self-reinforces the community in some respects.
Yes, exactly. And it makes it a much stronger community, because the creators, they feel valued and they feel, a greater connection to their community, and they give it right back to their members. So to their fans.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, it's pretty amazing that you've got all of these various components, if you will, kind of stacked on top of each other in terms of how you can monetize, from base level advertising, subscriptions, tip jars, and I wasn't thinking about $400 price points for like gifts, digital gifts, if you will, inside the platform. But that's and to your point, like, people could give multiple $400 gifts if they want, whatever their willingness and appetite to pay is. I mean, that creates a lot of headroom for you, to your point. So kudos. That's amazing.
Yes. And it's obviously a new model in terms of like, the dating space, but something that we've seen working very well in live streaming apps in Asia for many years. So it's a very proven model, just something that it still feels newer in the West. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Well, tell me a little bit about your role today as the head of marketing. What does that entail? Yeah, so I run the direct to consumer marketing for everything that has to do with Meet Me Scout Tag Growlers. So that's PR, that's performance marketing, and also just on the B2B side, that's speaking to VPAS and kind of evangelizing what the product is, how it works, and also the amazing things that our streamers are doing. Because a lot of for instance, one of our streamers on Tagged, her name's Forward Mommy. She's based in London. She had been a successful streamer for about a year, and then was realizing, so I have this platform, I should be doing something even more with it. And she's created her own beauty line. It's been featured in British Vogue, and she's has this it's the Streamer Heat palette, and it's an eyeshadow palette, and like each of the colors is named for things that are kind of are callbacks to the Tagged app. And so she is very entrepreneurial, and when you start to see creators doing amazing things like that, just finding their voice and finding, their passions. And that wasn't the reason she joined Tagged was to, actually the reason she joined Tagged actually was to stream. But the reason a lot of people join Tagged, is just to meet new people. And that is why they join. And then they end up finding different purposes, different passions for themselves. I think that that's just so exciting. So, part of my role, and my favorite part of the role, is really just talking to streamers and finding out more about their stories. Yeah. And I guess highlighting those stories or trying to, whether they're in the B2C world or in the B2B, makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's different sides of the story, I guess, that you're highlighting, but. Exactly. Because, and sometimes, the part of the story is like, oh, well, this member was maybe there's different feel good stories that come out of it, which are always nice, of course. But I feel like, even as marketers, like I've always done a ton of surveys, done a lot of, even qualitative research, spoken members and focus groups, things like that. But I think that when you're hearing and talking to members live, it's just a completely different experience where you really do know your members a lot better than before. So I think even in my own like use case of the app, like it's a fun way to spend your time, but really to know what you're building. I think that's something that our partners enjoy too, because this is something that prior to seeing this feature, your members aren't personal to you, but then as you see the stories, and you might read a million testimonials of weddings or things like that, but seeing them play out live is it's just a completely different and special experience. We actually have even had weddings live streamed because they met on live and they wanted their fans to be able to be at their wedding as well. So just seeing that we're, a part of that. So yeah, a big part of my role is also just finding those stories and sharing them.
That's amazing. Well, you mentioned performance marketing a little bit ago. What are some of your top tactics or strategies you're trying to do right now?
Yeah. So one of our top tactics that really works for us is using user-generated content as much as possible. For one thing, it just is so much more authentic, but also because, usually that could come in this format of a user sending us a testimonial. And then we ask, hey, can we use this on Snapchat? And they say, sure. And it just comes across so much more real, so much more authentic when it's in someone else's words than if we were to have like a voiceover over some stock video or stock images, because even your best stock images are still stock images. And so if you can show real people that use your service, it does so much better. Though even if you have to use stock images, it also is another tactic that we use is just knowing a lot about our users. So like, for instance, on Meet Me, we know that the average member is more likely to have a tattoo than the average American. And so when we're doing some of our campaigns, we've noticed that featuring images of people that have tattoos perform better. And so we measure that. We look to see, okay, well, let's see if we can find the types of images that do best. And so I would say, refreshing creative is so important. And for us, user generated just always does best. And then if you can't do user generated, then really get to know your user. What do they look like? What do they identify with? And see how you can use that. In general, the channels that have been the main strategy is really finding the channels where your members are. And so we know that, of course, everyone's going to be on Apple Search and Google UAC because that's where, you got to be in Play Store, you got to be in the App Store. And so having a smart search ads and Google UAC strategy is key. And those are both incredibly powerful platforms, especially for optimizing for downstream events. But also for us, platforms like Snapchat and TikTok are especially important because not only are they social, which our app is, and they skew younger, which our apps do, but they also have members that are interested in content and consuming content. And that's key for live streaming. And even like when you think about, okay, well, years ago, the focus used to be on CPI, and now the focus, of course, is on downstream events. And so for us, knowing the downstream events that matter, of course, matters. And so costs per video daily active user is something that we look at in optimizing, because we know that if someone becomes video user within their first day of registering, they're significantly more likely to be retained 30 days later. And so we're always looking for how we can move that basically events down funnel, such that we can acquire the members that will perform the best.
That's really smart. And frankly, as it drives loyalty on that measure as well. One of the things you mentioned to me, I think in an earlier conversation, which we have not talked at all about on the show, which kind of amazes me given the number of people I've had on, but is App Store Optimization, or ASO. One, tell us what that is, and then how does it work? And what have you found to work?
Yeah. So App Store Optimization is really just optimizing your App Store storefront. So if you're thinking about your storefront like you would if you had a brick and mortar store, it's how you portray yourself in the app stores. And so you have a number of levers that you can pull there. And so one, of course, is your icon, your screenshots, your description, and the keyword. So on the app store, you have some metadata keywords. Google's largely pulling just from your description, but any changes you make there can become incredibly important. So for instance, one time, and also this is important because both platforms now allow you to do A/B testing on the number of these items which is great because Apple hadn't for a bit, and now you can. And so that's so powerful because now, okay, say you want to change the main image of someone in the screenshots. Now you can do an A/B test to see which performs better. You can have custom store listings. So say for our users, say we want to have a different custom app store page for people that we know are coming in more for a dating use case versus people who are coming in more for a live streaming use case. We can do that. We can have tailored store pages. And so like one time we actually changed our app icon and for one of the apps, and we got it was something ridiculous. It was like a 20% boost for basically the same icon. It added I think it added some type of holiday flair or something. And now it wasn't, to be clear, it wasn't the icon was 20% better. Didn't perform 20% 100% better in A/B test. It probably was like an even trade. But what was important was that it probably got into a more curated position with the editorial teams in the stores just by making an app store change. And so that's kind of reason enough to make refreshes to make sure your store pages don't get stale. It kind of refreshes, where you are. It might, someone was scrolling top lists before, they might be like, oh, have I seen that app before, and be more likely to click in. But then you have to also focus on search. And so we use a number of tools to do that. One is what's now called Data AI. It used to be called App Annie. And so they have an ASO tool and paid search tool. It's useful so you can basically see where you're ranking for share of voice for any given keyword, where competitors are for that keyword, and even rough estimates for like bids, not the exact bid, but high, medium, low type of thing. And that helps. And that is super helpful in just like, okay, well, I want to rank top for free dating app. What are my what's the difficulty of doing that, first of all? And then what's the opportunity? So if I had that, how important would that be? And so kind of understanding the relationship between two things, because, it might be that, okay, well, that's exceedingly difficult and no one searches that. So it's not even important, which is not the case in free dating apps, but it is the case in many, many other terms. They might, but then there's other ones that are very clear, low hanging fruit that you could really, increase your organic downloads by updating. And so it's important to do these updates because your paid users, first of all, for apps, that's their introduction to your brand. And so you want it to be a smooth transition for them. And then for your organic users, and the majority of our members are organic, again, that's their introduction to the brand. You want to make sure that they can find you. These are free users. And so you want to make sure that they're searching the app store, that you're going to come up and that you're putting your the best portrayal of what they're going to find on your service. And so that's why it's so important. And then another important aspect that you don't have as much control of, but ratings and reviews obviously matter so much. And so it would be a mistake if you are not prompting your members to rate and review your app, because basically the more rating and reviews that you have, the better it is for other people who are checking out the app. I don't know of anyone that just downloads apps without at least double checking that it doesn't have like 1 star. And so you want to, of course, get those numbers up and make sure that you have not only a high rating, but then you also have a good quantity, a good volume of ratings coming through, because that's what your prospective members are going to be looking for, and that's also considered in where you're going to be ranking.
How does PR fit in? We talked about storytelling earlier in various ways, but I'm curious, like a tactic like that. I've heard other B2C or D2C type businesses use PR as a kind of hack, if you will, to some degree, because traditional media is really expensive, and that provides an opportunity to hack your way into greater awareness. How do you use it?
So definitely. So paid marketing can be quite expensive. So, taking advantage of really any viral aspect or earned aspect that you can really make or break the budget. And especially for startups that are on a very, and ourselves as well, have, relatively small budgets compared to maybe some of the other giants in the space. It's important to basically take advantage of how you can get your story out there and evangelize it. And so in early days, I used to cold email and cold tweet journalists, just letting them know about what we were doing. And it's like, if I read a story that I was like, oh, this journalist is clearly interested in this topic that relates to us, I try to introduce myself and try to enter the story that way. And typically you see that's as well. If you can get a hit that way, you're going to get more members. So like when we first started out, I remember we had a lot of media just from like business press, but business press wasn't really what our core demo was using. And then I remember I was in Cosmo Girl, and the numbers just shot up. And, if we had, paid, I don't know how much that would have cost if we had paid, it would have been like, we would not have been able to afford that type of membership growth. And so, if you can especially get into the consumer media where your members are looking, and that's important. But at the time too, business press was also incredibly important, because that's going to be more important when you're raising VC funds, or if you're B2B, finding partners. And so, I think it's important to kind of have that credibility, because again, this kind of goes back to the authenticity. Like if you're the only one telling your story, then that's not very, that's not nearly as strong. So getting your members to tell your story for you, or having a story that's worth telling and worth sharing in media is also incredibly important. But really taking advantage of anything that isn't paid marketing is always good. So if you have a product that has any viral aspects, figuring out how to make things even more shareable will pay off. And so a lot of that, is going to be, focusing to make sure your product is good before throwing a lot of money into paid marketing. Because if you don't understand where your retention should be, then you might need to fix the product before you throw more money into paid ads. Because when it comes down to it, like, paid marketing is very expensive. You want to make sure that you're using it very efficiently and that your prospective members, when they join, are finding what they should find. And so if your retention is worse than it should be in whatever space you're in, then that's what needs to be fixed first, really, before you do any other type of marketing activity.
No, that's super smart, and something that keep in mind as you're launching, because I think there probably is this tendency, especially for marketers, to get ahead of the product, right? In some cases, like, I want to get the word out that we're here, we exist, we're around, etc. But to your point, like, that could all be wasted, or even worse, highlight the defects that exist. So make sure the product, do it in stages, and and test as you go, I guess, is maybe the right advice. But that's very cool. I like how you're using PR, and man, if we could just replicate that Cosmo Girl bump every couple quarters, right? And last point that I would pull out that you said is, don't be afraid to just reach out to a journalist. It's amazing how many folks, even with my niche platform here in podcasting, just ask questions, and eventually that might make its way into either being covered or otherwise being noticed by the editorial community,
right? Or even if you're just providing background info on a space, just so that even if it's not your specific app or your specific business, like, it's useful to provide and be a resource just from an industry perspective. And that way, if you're proactive in that way, then, it can just help later.
Love it. Well, one of the things we like to do is get to know you even more than what we've talked about so far through the business conversation. And my favorite question to ask people that come on the show is, has there been an experience of your past that defines and makes up who you are today?
Yeah, it's I mean, not to sound like a broken record, but it's really hard not to go, founding the company.
Well, it was a pretty profound experience at an early age too. So
right, it's the majority of my life, and so it's hard to pick anything else because I've been doing it over half my life. It's how I even met my husband. It's how I met actually one of my best friends was through an early message on my yearbook, and we're still friends now, 17 years later, and we both have kids, and we're going through that together. And so every experience I've found through this company, I'm just so incredibly grateful for. And so those are my personal experience, but also just the amazing team that I've worked with. I feel like all the people I've worked with has really sculpted who I am as a person. And so this experience of starting the company, there were, a bunch of things that come from that. You certainly don't have a normal high school or college experience, or even, probably any normal experiences following that. And so all of that kind of, sculpts who I am. But the amazing people that I've had, that I've had the privilege to work with are just so incredibly talented. And so being surrounded by so many smart people has just, made me want to always keep trying harder and keep trying harder to make something wonderful for our members too. Because now I have this, the experience of being able to speak with our members and see what they're up to, and kind of in a way that I never used to be able to. And so I want all of the wonderful things for them. And so I love, and so really that's starting the company and just seeing where it has led me has been, life defining.
It's amazing. What advice would you give your younger 15-year-old self if you're starting all over again?
So I guess there's kind of two pieces. So one is, seeking out advice. Advice isn't always easy to come by. People, which if you're on the other end of it, sometimes you might feel like you have too many, but honestly, I feel like most people don't give advice. And so I think it's important if you see someone that you're like, hey, how are you doing this? And you ask for advice. So many people are so helpful and will provide it. I don't think that there's any reason to feel like, oh, I have to figure this out myself. And I think that, as an entrepreneur, it's like, there's sometimes like the focus to be, oh, let me figure out exactly how to do this myself. But why reinvent the wheel if you can seek out advice from someone who's been in your shoes before? And so that's a huge part of it. And then also I like saying, if you're not making mistakes, then you're not making decisions, because there's always going to be, some measure of uncertainty in any decision you make. And so it's important to follow and collect all the information for what you do know, and know everything possible that you can know. And then kind of from there, you need to make choices. And there's still going to be things that you wish you knew that you have no way of knowing. And it's important to figure out what the things are that you have no way of knowing and need to just make a decision on so that you can keep moving forward, and the things that aren't. So it's important to keep going. And then obviously, making sure that you have, exit options. So if you needed to make a decision about something, but, do it as an experiment and see what the results are. And that can make you, that can help you inform the decision, of course. But even still, there's going to be some cases where you're never going to know what the right decision is, but you still have to make that decision in those times of uncertainty. And you just kind of have to do it and follow your gut after a while. Once you already figure out, everything you already can know about it, uncertainties. Okay.
Right. It's okay to make that decision. Is there a topic that either you believe marketers need to be learning more about right now, or you're trying to learn more about yourself?
Yeah. So I was listening to, you spoke with Don McGuire Qualcomm recently. I was just in that, and you mentioned, specifically following the macro trends. I definitely want to echo that and say, give that another mention, because, as marketers, we need to know what could be the next big trend in viral channel, and just being up on every viral or every, macro trend, and being at least familiar. If, you might not be able to be deep on everything, but being at least familiar will be just important in not only how you do your own job, but also how you relate to your potential audience. And then my second piece is that I think, marketers need to kind of be learning about is pretend your marketing budget was $0. How would you be doing things differently? And so I think, being very heavily involved with product, and realizing, marketing is not just external marketing. Your relationship with the member doesn't end when they sign up. And so thinking, how can you increase retention? How can you put in viral loops within your own product that could be even more important than some of the paid channels? So I feel like, a lot of the focus ends up going to a lot of paid channels, but I think it's important to kind of think scrappy and think, what should you be learning about if you didn't have, say, if you're a big brand, so if you didn't have a big budget, like what would you be spending time on? And a lot of that is spending time on product and really learning about those members and figuring out more about that journey and how you can increase the time with that member. Yeah,
no, it makes sense. I mean, your biggest asset really is still the product, like what you're actually delivering. And it would be, to your point, we probably do lose sight of that's an opportunity to reinforce the relationship with the customer, but also how can that experience actually help you market the product itself? So that's smart. Well, two more questions for you. On a personal note, are there brands or companies or causes that you follow or you think other people should take notice of?
Yeah. So Oasis Consortium actually recently, this year, released their user safety standards. It's consumer safety standards basically for Web3. It's basically a first of its kind blueprint for how platforms should be creating a safer space for their members. And, safety has been part of the Meet Group's DNA since we started. Now we have over 500 human moderators, as well as we use, sophisticated AI to moderate our platforms. There's a lot of content that we have. We have over 200,000 hours of live streaming content every day. Over 1 billion minutes of live streaming content are spent in video per month. So it's important to have that piece. But what's amazing about what Oasis is doing is really evangelizing, how safety should be a priority in organizations. And so a lot of times when you think of trust and safety at organizations, you see that it's kind of siloed off. And what you really want is it to be cross-functional. And so, for instance, in our safety meetings, not only does just Jeff, who's our CEO, he's there, our general counsel's there, our SVP of product, I'm there for marketing. Like, it's important to have everyone involved and be aware of, trust and safety so that we can bring the industry forward. And so that's, something that I've been working on too. We now publish a transparency report on our safety practices. We've tried to be very vocal about what we're doing because, for instance, when it comes down to something like, we have a minute response, less than a minute response time between, when a piece of content is reported before we have a paid moderator looking at it. That's the best in the live streaming industry that we know of. However, no one really publishes those metrics. So it becomes harder to know. And so in order to create a safer Web3 for everyone, I think what companies really need to be doing is basically, if they can pledge the Oasis user safety standards, that's great. That way we can have more industry transparency and build a better internet for all.
I like that a lot. And especially it's cool that you're so focused on it, given your position in the market too, and what your platform does. I applaud your efforts for that. Thank you for that. Well, Last question on marketing front. What do you feel like is either the largest opportunity or threat facing marketers today?
So Apple really mixed things up. So I'm going to say that's kind of like a nice opportunity and threat because, well, it's not really a threat that, things change, you move on. But the opportunity is, okay, well, now things are different. So you have to think about it. Just basically allows for the opportunity to think of things differently. And so I would expect Google to do something similar. And marketers, privacy, everyone has the right to privacy is incredibly important. And so really it becomes an opportunity for how basically you change your strategies. Now, I will say in the short term, you're going to notice that your existing campaigns are different, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're worse. You just have to, it's just a new thing to learn. So I think that's kind of exciting. I expect to see more changes in that area because I think it is an important area that is welcome in a lot of ways. But of course, despite lots of preparation, of course, we're still talking about it. And so I think that it's just going to continue to evolve. And so if you can find, but there's a huge opportunity now, and now not only in ad tech, but also just figuring out how to do things with this kind of paradigm shift.
Yeah. Well, and I think it forces the creativity to come back out, right? And marketing, where we might have knew kind of how the math would work if I pumped X amount in. And now the math changes, right? So we have to figure out the new formula for being able to grow or acquire users at the same rate. And I think creativity plays a big role in that. Catherine, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We got to talk about a number of topics that we haven't covered before. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me with support from my team and podcast editors, sound engineers, and writers at Share Your Genius. Find them at shareyourgenius.com. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe on marketingtodaypodcast.com and tell your friends and colleagues about the show. I love to hear from listeners. You can contact me on marketingtodaypodcast.com. There you will also find complete show notes, links to what was discussed in the episode today, and you can search our archives. I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.